The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us on this first Monday in February. And before we get to our guest tonight, I just wanted to quickly thank everybody over at Council Room for quite the amazing weekend. It was pretty incredible, to be honest, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of people out there, actually, that came up to us. Matt McNeil was out there as well on Saturday, and a number of folks came up to us saying that they heard about the convention through AM 950, so I'm very happy to hear that. As for myself, I was able to have a conversation, an interview on stage, Peter Davison, who played the Fifth Doctor, and also Nicola Bryan, who played Perry, plus a couple of my own very, very nerdy presentations. And it was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to next year. We've been talking a lot of Doctor Who leading up to the convention, and now we're moving on to different subjects tonight, and I am very excited to get to our guest tonight. Tonight, we're talking with researcher and author Chad Lewis. Chad, like we said, is a researcher, author, and lecturer on topics of the strange and unusual. His background is in the field of psychology, as he did both his bachelor's and master's degree work in that field. But for nearly 30 years, he has traveled the globe in search of unique and bizarre stories and histories. He's been everywhere, and he's written about a lot of things. He has a lot of books out there. He's always giving lectures. To find out where he's lecturing next or where to get his books, or you can check out a lot of stuff on his webpage. Go to chadlewisresearch.com. That is chadlewisresearch.com. And I am very excited to be able to welcome Chad to GhostBox Radio. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, greetings from the back roads of Wisconsin.
Where are you out there, by the way? I mean, I don't need your address, but you know, just wondering.
Yeah, I'm out there in the Chippewa Valley and the back roads of the weirdest legends and lore, the foggiest gravel street. Take a turn down there and you see that car parked on the side of the road, somebody with a flashlight looking around. That's me.
You seem to be set up in a place that if it's not happening there, it's certainly going to inspire you with your writing and research, right?
I think for me, being at these locations where weird things are said to happen is very important, not just to get a lay of the land, but to see what else might be causing these things, or just get a feel of the culture, the people, the environment. That's very important for me. So every place I talk about or that I write about, I really love being there in person.
Yeah, I would completely understand that. One of the books that we're going to kind of focus on tonight is Paranormal Minnesota, Ghosts, Monsters, and UFOs. You can get that over at chadlewisresearch.com in the store over there. And it's incredible that everywhere has their lore, everywhere has their monsters and stuff. And you are very regional, aren't you, generally speaking? I know you are all over the planet, but I always think of you being regional to like Minnesota, Wisconsin, probably Illinois. Is that fair?
Yes. My first book 20 some odd years ago was Wisconsin. And then I did some on Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota. So I love the Midwest. Although I travel, as you said, the world, I love legends from everywhere. Nothing beats the Midwest in terms of the variety of legends we have, how bizarre they are, and the history and culture of these legends, it's unbeatable in the Midwest.
And where did this all start for you? And I'm curious, like your level set of these monsters and lore and stuff. I mean, as such a keen researcher and writer, are you in the camp of I believe, or are you in the camp of I'm gonna talk about it and we're gonna see what happens, or wherever?
It really depends on the day you talk with me.
Sure.
That I try to stay in the middle and let
Sure.
facts sort from fiction, or see where things go, try to debunk stuff. But really, I got into this like a lot of people, thinking this is going to be easy. I'll solve a few cases, figure this out, no problem.
Right.
And over the last nearly 30 years or so, I've really shifted from trying to solve some of this stuff to embracing it as a legend and folklore, and what it means for us as a culture, and what these stories mean to us as a society, and how they morph and progress. Because so many people I got into it when I did, they burned out because they would go to these places and maybe something wouldn't happen, and they just got bored with it. So early on, I switched from looking at what these things might be, which I still do, but more seeing it as the adventure, the bigger picture, if you will. But in terms of belief, I'm probably right down the middle, trying to let the facts sort me from one way to the other.
And I kind of wonder, and maybe this is just my own personal take on it. I kind of wonder if some of the stuff is not meant to be solved. You know, we learn about it. We you know, and I love to read the books and stuff. But you know, maybe that's kind of the point too. Is that some things just are not able to be solved.
That's a great point. I did a book on a lake monster in Minnesota on the Mississippi River. It's a lake on the river. The creature is called Peppy, the lake monster of Lake Pepin, and did an entire book. And at the end, I made a comment that a lot of people would look at us never finding Peppy, or never solving it, or never explaining it, as a complete failure. But for me, it was the exact opposite. That I love the fact that maybe these legends will be around 200 years from now,
Right.
and people still have no idea what's going on. So for me, the point isn't actually solving, because I think it's rare. Nobody's, solved Bigfoot or UFOs, or, but the adventure of it is what I think you can take home with you every single time, regardless of whether something happens or not.
And Pepe was one I was going to talk about today, because I spend a fair amount of time down in Wabasha, which is just down the road from Lake City, and well, first of all, it's beautiful. So if you want to go down, just go down and enjoy the beauty of it all. But I mean, there's something fun too, I think, about going and looking at Lake Pepin, and you might see something bulging out of the water that could be like a log, and it'd still be like, or could it be something else? I mean, there is something fun about like the possibilities, let alone the, it almost like if suddenly like Peppy came, waddling out of the lake, it'd be like, oh, okay, now we know. Now what? Okay, whatever. Now we know Peppy exists. So yeah, I kind of like the idea that I'd much rather hear almost like the little bits that doesn't lead to it being completely exposed, perhaps.
I really, as well, that I love that. And I love the fact that perhaps there are people who dangle their toes in Lake Pepin and then maybe quickly pull them out thinking, what if? Because there are a lot of other big fish in Lake Pepin. But I found it interesting that every time I go there, I'll talk to fishermen and women out in their boats and ask if they've ever seen anything. And a lot of them will say, no, of course not. They're not believers. But I'm surprised at how many of them say, well, we have our camera here just in case, or we're ready just in case of a sighting, because it's received so much international attention that they hold the possibility that they might not necessarily believe, but they like the legend of it and they're there just in case. And one of the proprietors of a hotel near Lake Pepin that promoted Peppy's legend would always say that if you go to Lake Pepin and you don't see Peppy, the worst that's going to happen is you'll spend a day at the lake or a weekend at the lake, which is a nice prize for second place, I guess.
And it's beautiful out there. Very quick story about it. Almost 2 years ago now, we had an event over at the Anderson House, and after the event, a couple of us walked across, and that's in Wabasha, walked across the street to where the Mississippi River was, and we were trying to do some basically some squatching, and we were calling out. We had a speaker, which probably wasn't great for the people trying to sleep at night, and with sounds of that could possibly been like Bigfoot sounds or whatever, and playing it. And we started hearing some tree knocking across the river, which would be into Wisconsin. But then something big came out of the water and splashed back down at that moment, which of course all of us are like, oh my God. Could very well just be a big fish. That's something that happens in that area. But to your point, that's that whole part of it. That's like, it just adds to the experience and adds to great storytelling when you're talking to your friends about it too.
It is. And I've spent a lot of time swimming in Lake Pepin. I was living on a houseboat for many days and nights on a Pepe expedition. And I can tell you, swimming, that even though in your mind, you're probably safe. I'm thinking Pepe's not going to gobble me up. I'm not going to get carried away, but every little branch or twig that pushes by your legs or your toes, it has your mind conjuring up images of the giant sea serpent, coming after you. So I loved it because I was always tense in the water with that possibility, even though deep down I knew I was safe, but it was still that fringe element there that anything's possible.
Kind of like that thing where you're on the boat and all of a sudden it just comes out of the water and the boat's on its back, right? And lifting you up and stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone have an idea of roughly how big they think Pepe is?
Well, what's interesting is throughout history, and we have oral tales going back hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And we have written tales, newspaper accounts going back to the Civil War, talking about something big being in the water. And some of the reports back then was reporting, they were reporting that it was somewhere between the size of an elephant and a rhinoceros in the water. But they also thought it might be a whale because they didn't know much about the lake at that time. But there seems to be two types of sightings of Pepe. One would be your traditional Loch Ness-like, plesiosaur-looking, long-necked sea serpent.
Yep.
Which when you ask somebody about a sea serpent, that's immediately what they think of.
Absolutely.
So we get the reports of those 20 to 30 feet long, but then we also get reports of long snake-like, eel-like beast with a diameter, 12 inches and 40 feet long. So I don't know if people are seeing different things or the same thing from a different angle, or just human perception varies from person to person. It seems to be split into those two camps.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always assumed Pepe looks like what we consider the Loch Ness Monster to look like, 100%, with, those little fins for arms and legs, right? And that's about it. And I mean, do you have, there's I'm sure a lot of reasons why, if there is a creature in there that we don't see it, what are your thoughts on to why, if Pepe is real, why we don't ever see it?
Yes. Why haven't people seen it? Definitive photographs. If there's a breeding population there,
yeah.
Why haven't any of the carcasses floated up onto the shore? Anyone discovered these things? And that's the most troubling question, that if there was a population big enough to breed and continue for hundreds of years, it's not like this is an abandoned place in Alaska that nobody gets to. This was a heavily tourist area that people are out on boats all summer long on the Mississippi. So the question then becomes, why haven't we found it? And for a lot of people, they revert back to the idea maybe that it's not there the way we think it is, like a sturgeon or a carp, that it's there, but maybe not in the same view that we think. Maybe it's from somewhere else or someplace else or some time else. And that would be an easy fix to why we don't have any proof.
Sure.
But I guess the short answer is I have no idea. You would think that if this thing was really there, we would have discovered something better than a couple old photographs of the alleged sightings.
One thing that's really coming to mind for me when you and I are talking here is something I guess I never really put my finger on, and that is the idea of the excitement of wanting to know without knowing, the excitement of the research, without maybe coming to a definitive conclusion of it. The fact that we don't know is actually the exciting part of it all, and that leads to possibilities. If there is like some sort of radar over all of Lake Pepin, and they're like definitively said there's no possible way there's a Pepe, that would be very sad to me. I much rather live in a world where anything is possible, including the fact that there is a little friend out there in our lakes, like a Pepe. I mean, it's just that I didn't really think about that until we're talking right now.
For the last 3 decades, I firmly believe that these legends are more important than the legends themselves. That it's more important that the Pepe legend is out there because these things exist because we exist. They're part of us. They came over for us non-indigenous people. They came over when our ancestors came to this country. They brought their legends of vampires and werewolves with them. Most people would put their cities by water or their camps by water. So, of course, there'd be water legends of serpents and other creatures of the aquatic nature. So these things exist because we're here. So I hope that these legends continue on far into the future. And I'm with you that if all of a sudden they drained Lake Pepin somehow and nothing was there, it would lose some of its magic.
Very much so. Very much so. So why don't we go ahead and do this? I want to go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we want to get into the book here that we've been talking about, Paranormal Minnesota, Ghosts, Monsters, and UFOs. And I want to talk about some more of these monsters that are in Minnesota. We have Chad Lewis with us. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com. What you wear is important. It should be fun, creative, and expressive of your own personality. At Grady Gear Company, we believe that clothing is more than just fabric and threads. It's a form of self-expression and a way to stand out from the crowd. Grady Gear is more than just a clothing brand. We're a community. We're here to inspire and motivate you to embrace your true self. We are a locally owned small business who do custom clothing orders too. Find us at GradyGearCompany.com. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
And I want to remind everybody that Char Savoy and I, we're doing a paranormal class. We do this, offer this out every once in a while. It's called Paranormal Dimensions and the Supernatural. This is a 6-week course. We really go into a lot about looking for, paranormal investigations to UFOs, cryptozoology. We get into the metaphysical. We also like to show people, and we play a lot of evidence. We play a lot of recordings, but we also like to make sure people are prepared to go out and to take part in paranormal investigations, including what do you do with all this media that you get after you go on an investigation of these audio recordings, maybe you have video recordings. How do you edit some of these videos in a very simplistic way? We really try to make it a full rounded class. And then when we're done, we'll take the class to a paranormal weekend where they will be able to not only practice, but also more than likely they're going to run into something. We've had a lot of luck with that. And then what we also do is after you take the course, you're kind of family at that point. When we do our own events with people who have taken the course before, we always make sure that we invite everyone to these things. So it's kind of it's really a wonderful experience. And you can find out more about the course over at charvinity.com. You go over to her page and you click on classes and events. And once again, the class is called Paranormal Dimensions and the Supernatural. The next session starts February 10th. It's 6 p.m. to 8:30 every Monday night. Just know, though, that it's in person, also online at the same time. And if you're unable to make some of the classes where you record it, we'll send it your way. So no reason not to take it. Just like there's no reason why not to buy all of Chad Lewis's books. You can go over to chadlewisresearch.com and see everything, all 500 books you have, Chad. My goodness, good for you. I mean, this is, you really run this area with all these great books. I'm just looking at your page on chadlewisresearch.com, and you have Back Road Lore. You have Illinois Guide. Well, if I could read, I'm so excited I can't even read, Chad. The Illinois Guide to Haunted Places. You just have a lot of great books, but what I want to focus on tonight, we're talking about Paranormal Minnesota, ghosts, monsters, and UFOs. And where do you find some of these things? A devil moose. Where? How? What do you know about this stuff and you just decide you're going to look into it? Is it people telling you, like, have you looked into the devil moose? I've never heard of the devil moose, and that's kind of exciting for me.
One of my absolute favorite things of this field is you're always learning, or at least I'm always learning.
Yep.
I'm always grabbing new stories that might be old stories and a lot of time people will contact me asking if I ever heard about this, or do you know this legend? A lot of people will come to my lectures and then have a story. It might just be a family story or a local regional story. Sometimes I'm digging through old newspaper articles, like with the devil moose. I was doing research on some other story, and I just stumbled across about a decade ago about these newspaper accounts from the North Woods of Minnesota, Lake of the Woods area, Crookston and north and west and east of it. And they were talking about the native peoples there, the indigenous peoples, talking about a gigantic moose that lived in the bog areas, the heavily forested wetlandish area. And it was a monster that it seemed to be a hodgepodge of different animal parts. You couldn't track it because its print would change. Seemed like something stepped out of Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. And the native people, they told the pioneers and the explorers that this was a supernatural being, that it had important significance to it, that it was a spiritual thing, that do not harm it. Bad luck will happen if you go looking or try to harm it. So, of course, the newspaper said that the first thing the pioneers did was to get a hunting party together to go search for it. And this was in the early 1900s. And eventually they had several giant hunting parties of over 100 men armed to the teeth, walking through the woods and the wetlands looking for the devil moose, trying to kill it. And maybe thankfully or unfortunately, they never found it. And I like to think that it's still there, this humongous moose that was said to be, of gigantic proportions, that you couldn't mistake it for a regular moose. You knew this was something different. And that happened from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, but I didn't hear of it until about 10 years ago when I just happened across a article on it, and I started digging for more. And everywhere I go talking about it, people have never heard of it. Just absolutely like it was buried and forgotten, which I'm always astonished by that this legend of a humongous moose that is supernatural in the woods, and people are like, yeah, let's just forget about that.
Well, and I think the best way to go and research these monsters and stuff is to get a massive hunting party together and just, just trawl the woods and just, blow everything away. No, obviously not. Do you think, this is kind of interesting, you kind of talk about, this devil moose, something that they talked about between the late 1800s, early 1900s, then nothing. Do you think does that actually give you a little bit, like it gives it a little bit more credibility that something like this might have existed, but also might have just simply died? And that was, it doesn't have to mean that it lived for the rest of eternity, but it had a lifespan, but it was something that was different than a regular moose or whatever.
I like that theory because it would explain why we're not seeing this thing in the tourist areas and people hunting, and now game cams and ATVs and all of that it just so happened that this creature's lifespan kind of crossed over to the point where people started recording stuff in print. Mm-hmm. Before, it was all oral legends, oral tales. And then as soon as it got to print, this thing or these things, died out.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting because there are other cases of things being tied to a time period and then it's gone. What happened to this thing? Why is it not there? Where did it go? Where other phenomena seems to happen, like Pepe we were talking about, has a 200-year history of sightings continuing on and on and on and on. Whereas the devil moose, it seemed like a good decade at most, and then it's just completely gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a puzzling question of, did it just die out? Was it kind of a fad or hallucination of these people, hysteria in the community, and then they just came to their senses? For me, that's the most fascinating question.
And the fact of how quickly people forget, right? And that you talk to anyone these days, like you said, and they're like, what do you mean? What is that? That is also very interesting to me because we do forget very quickly, don't we, as societies?
Yes, I'm fascinated by the fact that I'll go into a community where there might have been a sighting of something strange in the 1980s or even 1990s, early 2000s, and you talk to residents from that area, and they have no idea what you're talking about. Never heard of it. Don't know anything about it. And I think there's several reasons for that. But I think one is that today people are moving all over.
Yeah.
It used to be someone would grow up in the town. They might never leave that county. They were there for their lives. They lived there for 50 years. So they knew everything about the town. But now you're finding people are mobile where they might live in 9 different states during their life, where they don't live somewhere long enough to get involved with the local community groups or local history. So they don't know anything about the area.
Yeah, and that gives me a lot of questions, but I want to kind of stay on what I wanted to talk about because there is something I want to talk about. I've always been very fascinated about, and it seems very mysterious and very scary to me at the same time. And because it's been cited in Minnesota a lot over, and it goes back to indigenous people, Wendigo. I wanted to talk about Wendigo a little bit, and just for those who are unaware, what is that?
So many cultures don't even say the name of the creature that.
Which I did.
Go looking for.
Yeah.
You're dead, but
yep,
I'm
exactly.
still here.
I've always been inside though. Anyway, yeah. So
yeah. So the idea that this creature was known by many different names and many different spellings and pronunciations of the Wendigo, of this cannibalistic monster of the North, that when times were tough, food was scarce, game was nowhere to be found, you were at your weakest mentally, physically, spiritually, maybe even resorting to cannibalism in those days, that this thing would show up. And it could show up in at least two forms. One, a flesh and blood monster, 8 feet tall or as big as it wanted to be, thin, skeletal, emaciated. And then it could show up and it would devour you, of course. But worse yet, it could show up in almost a spirit-like form where it could possess you and slowly turn you into a Wendigo. And many tribes, cultures, the pioneers, the French explorers and missionaries, they believed that if they wouldn't have killed somebody that was turning Wendigo, that person would have turned into a Wendigo and attacked the entire town, village, or tribe. So we have all these stories from the 1800s, early 1900s of people killing one another, believing they were a Wendigo. And this was mainly throughout all of Canada and the Great Lakes region of the U.S. as well. It quickly spread from the First Nations people of Canada to the U.S. here as well. And most people are amazed when I tell them there are a lot of places in America, many in Minnesota, where they still believe a Wendigo is there, that it still resides there, even in modern day times.
I would, if I went somewhere and someone said to me that a Wendigo is there, I would believe it, without a doubt. And I think I would err on the side of I would believe it just so nothing happens to me. I mean, because that's always been one of those pieces, one of those spirits, one of those lores that have really fascinated me over the year, because it is literally like you're not messing around with this one. You know, the devil. the other one, the devil moose, that's something else. But Wendigo, I'm not going to mess around with that. Let's just put it that way.
There was no other creature, legend, folklore that was more dreaded and feared in North America than that of the Wendigo. We have stories of people hearing that there was a Wendigo in the region. They didn't see it, they didn't hear it, they didn't smell it. They heard it was there, and they starved to death in their lodging or their camps because they were afraid to go out to hunt for game, that they would rather starve than to go looking for this thing. That was the terror that the Wendigo brought, that suspicion that anyone could be turned was a terrifying proposition for a lot of the early peoples of Canada and the U.S.
I suppose you get a lot of questions too if you think that the Wendigo have any relation to skinwalkers.
Yes, all the time. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about Wendigo stuff and skinwalkers, is that completely separate lore, completely separate tribes that believe it. Whereas we're skinwalkers, you're looking southwestern United States, mostly warm cultures, where the Wendigo or the Witico was cold, ice. It was thought to be the embodiment of ice and suffering, even though there were reports of it during summertime. These reports only came from northern cold cultures, that whenever somebody was eating someone down in Florida, we blamed it on, meth or whatever else they were doing, the bath salts, I think it was.
Sure.
Nobody mentioned a Wendigo because the Wendigo only seemed to be in cold cultures. And this was a trying time. If you go up into the Northwoods of Minnesota and obviously Canada, it's very easy to feel what they would have felt 150 years ago when you look around and there's nothing there. There's no Quick Trip, obviously, to go and grab your snack. So life was brutal. And you put this fear of this monster lurking in the woods, and the fact that the only way to truly get rid of it was after you killed it, which there were many ways it was said to be able to be killed. You had to cremate it to nothing left. Otherwise, the fear was it would simply go out into the woods, wait for its next victim, and then grabbed them.
Jeez. Yeah.
And no one was safe. Women, men, both female Wendigo, male Wendigos. We have stories of babies turning Wendigo, dogs and other animals turning Wendigo. So it didn't have any rhyme or reason to it. You couldn't say, well, it only happens to females or it only happens to animals. I'm safe. No matter what your religion, your beliefs were, everybody seemed to be prey for the Wendigo.
Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully our listeners are able to get to sleep tonight after we're done with this episode. Let's go ahead. Let's take another break. We're talking about Chad Lewis. We're interviewing him. We're talking about one of his books, Paranormal Minnesota, Ghosts, Monsters, and UFOs. And in fact, we're going to talk some UFOs when we get back. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950.
Reach your highest level of consciousness and well-being with MetamorphosisConnections.com. MetamorphosisConnections.com is an online directory of the best holistic and metaphysical practitioners to help you make your most informed choices. You can search MetamorphosisConnections.com for classes, events, wellness and life coaches, plus metaphysical products and shops. You can also search for a wide array of healers from all modalities, including EFT, sound healing, energy healing, light therapy, ancestral healing, shamanic healing, reflexology, past life regressions, hypnotherapy, yoga, and more. And if you're not sure where to start, the search feature on MetamorphosisConnections.com is tailored to help both those who know what they are looking for and those who are just starting. Come explore the possibilities for your higher self by visiting MetamorphosisConnections.com. Their experienced practitioners can guide both beginners and those that are already on their spiritual journey. That's MetamorphosisConnection.com, your link to direct you on your spiritual transformation.
Lilliput in Coon Rapids dares you to take part in their Haunted Mansion escape room. 100 years ago, a family suffered a tragic incident. Your team is brought in to find out what happened that night, find proof of the supernatural, and help the spirits find peace. Are you up for the task? This incredible escape room is filling up fast, so book now. Also, a perfect outing for work team building. Go to lilliput.net now to book your experience today. Greg Bakun here. Like many of you, I still collect physical books, and not just any books, but books about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. I go to Megas Books and Herbs, located in the Arts District of Minneapolis, but books are only part of it. Megas Books and Herbs offers crystals, jewelry, herbs, oils, and consultations on how to use this stuff. Check out their in-store classes and events too. This place has everything to expand your horizons. Located at 1848 Central Avenue, Minneapolis, or visit megasbooks.com.
This is Chad, owner of AM 950. Recently, I had a large order of custom-designed t-shirts that needed to be turned around in a hurry. I knew exactly who to call. Gritty Gear Company. Gritty Gear Company is a local company that handles large and small custom clothing and apparel orders. I had a lot of questions from color, shirt quality, and what sizes we needed. Gritty Gear Company was great to work with. They got us what we needed on time, and now everybody's looking great around the station in their new gear. Start your order at grittygearco.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. And I wanted to remind folks, this week, February 5th, Wednesday, we have the return of Ghost Stories and Beyond over at Billy's in Anoka. You come on out, and this time we're going to have a presentation by author June Gosler Anderson, and she's actually going to do a presentation about haunted Anoka, so it's a very timely place. If you haven't really looked into the history of Anoka and the haunted side of it. It's really interesting. It's very good. And June is a great author. She has written a lot of books about paranormal locations around the world. She is a keen traveler, a very intelligent person who's going to really have a lot to say on Wednesday, and we're very excited for her to join us. It's also half-price burgers. Don't forget that. That's almost as important as the guest that's going to be there, and it's $10 at the door. It starts at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, February 5th. Shar and I will be there. Please come on out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm actually really looking forward to hearing about Haunted Anoka. And then this week, join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We're going to have Marie Cisneros. We're going to be talking about Haunted Muskegon and Haunted Newaygo County. Wednesday, we're going to have one-question readings with Refined Divine. Thursday, we're going to do a replay with Alex Matsuo as we talk about women in the paranormal, and then we always, as always, wrap it up Friday with Casual Friday. So there's a lot to look forward to this week, a lot to look forward to in our final segment. We are talking with researcher, author, lecturer Chad Lewis, and we're talking about one of his books, Paranormal Minnesota, Ghosts, Monsters, and UFOs. Please go to chadlewisresearch.com and see where he's lecturing, see how many different books he has. There's going to be one that you're going to be very interested in adding to your collection, and there's a lot going on with Chad, so please go check it out. And I really, Chad, I appreciate you taking the time and talking with me tonight. I've been really hoping for this for a long time, and this is great, so thank you very much for that.
I just have to say that I love Anoka, the Halloween capital of the world. And if you haven't been, get to Billy's for the event. It's one of the coolest old historic places that you can visit, and a lot of activity, as you know, still going on there. So I couldn't recommend that event highly enough, that just getting to Anoka and feeling being there, and the longest running Halloween parade, and great time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that very much. I wanted to talk a little bit. We have already, we just only have about 10 minutes left. I wanted to talk about UFOs in Minnesota. And what is one of your favorite occurrences or stories surrounding UFOs in Minnesota?
UFOs are what got me into the field.
Oh, wow.
As a high school student, I joined the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON.
Yeah.
And it went from there. And Minnesota is chock full of great UFO encounters. One of my favorite of all time, not just in Minnesota, but one of my favorites from around the world that I've encountered, was the old Warren UFO encounter of 1979, where up in Warren, Minnesota, way up in the north by the Canadian border over by North Dakota, sheriff's officer was patrolling late at night and saw a weird light flying low in the sky and thought it might have been an airplane, maybe drug smuggling at that time, or someone drunk driving out there. Wasn't quite sure. So he started speeding toward it, and it started coming faster toward him, crazy fast. And then the next thing he knew, he woke up on the side of the road. He had lost time. He was unconscious. He had like welder burns on his eyes, and he thought it was a UFO, and there was damage to his vehicle. And the best part of the legend is that they have his old car, his old police car, at their county museum on display, with still the cracked windshield that seemed to be busted from the inside, the bent antenna, the busted out headlight, all of which you can see for yourself. And the officer, Val Johnson, was convinced that something odd had happened to him. So it's not often you get a trained observer, like a police officer, men and women who have been trained to observe things, but also some physical evidence. The car is still there on display for you to go check out.
I know this story, and I also know that Val is somebody who does not, he has no more to say on the matter. That being said, did you ever get a chance to talk to him?
I did not. And ironically, Val now lives in my hometown of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Oh. But a colleague of mine, BJ Hollers, who wrote a book on Midwest Strange, he talked with Val, and you're right. Val never returned any of my calls, but BJ is good at this. And he talked to him, and same thing, that he has nothing new. And I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on the witness to have some great grand idea 30 years after an event happened that we in the field don't even have. We
Absolutely.
Study these things. We try to learn about them, and we're no closer to an explanation. So for somebody that's had this happen for one night of their life and it was done, I think it's unfair that we look to these witnesses as having some great insight, because they're as perplexed as the rest of us are. But he still keeps with this story that never said he thought it was an alien or anything, but it was just unidentified. It was flying. It was an object. And, he was taken to the hospital at the time, and they said he had welder, high radiation or heat burns on his face, and that many people were joking, thought maybe he had been out drinking and crashed the car.
Right.
But all the damage seemed to be as though it was mysterious. Like the headlight was busted out, but no signs of impact or damage there. And Val did a couple interviews, did some national television at that time, but then quickly just forgot about it, didn't want to talk about it. And I find that over and over and over with witnesses, that they don't want this to be the telltale sign of their life. They want it to be something that happened to them. They can't explain it and move on. But for some people, some witnesses, it's life-changing.
Right.
Especially people who claim they've been abducted by these beings, these extraterrestrial entities, or what be it, that a lot of them often will get involved in environmental issues, or they become more spiritual or focus on new age stuff. So sometimes it does have a life-altering effect, but other times, people are fed up. They said, I've told you everything I know about this. Nothing else happened for 30 years. What more can I say about it?
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, I mean, and that's just it with Val and everything else. It's you don't know what it is with that situation, but when you get a person that's involved with the law and stuff like that, that a police officer or something else, I'm not saying that if you were to tell me something, I would immediately not believe you. Obviously I would. But when you get someone who is, kind of trained to kind of be very rational about a situation, when you get them to be like, yeah, this is, I can't explain it. It was weird. I'm interested then. I love that.
And a lot of these people, they have no real interest in the paranormal. I have so many people tell me,
yes,
when they want to tell me their story, they'll say, now, I don't believe in ghosts, or I don't believe in sea serpents, but this is what I saw.
Yes.
So it was a one-off anomaly for them, that they're not out actively looking for it. They're not like us. They're not studying it. They're not trying to learn. They're simply going about their day-to-day life when something odd happens to them. And like most people, they're simply trying to figure out what the heck that was.
Absolutely. Now, as we have about 4 minutes left or so, what have you seen anything yourself that you're just like, I don't know what that was? That's interesting.
Great question. As I said, I go to every place I write about or talk about. I'm there exploring, and very rarely does something happen to me where I would say that's paranormal or supernatural 100%. It's always very subtle things where we might be at a haunted place, and years ago when we used film, 35 millimeter film, we might all of a sudden find some weird mist or fog that wasn't visible to the naked eye appeared on the camera, or psychics or intuitives I bring with me claim that they've been pushed or pinched by these things, but often it's real subtle, for me at least. It's never anything where people are speaking in tongues or things are flying around the room or a UFO lands in the backyard. So at least for me, it's very subtle, where I could probably fit on a couple fingers things where I thought that was unusual. That might have had a weird explanation.
Now, Not that I'm expecting not expecting people to speak in tongues to you, but do you think it's also your frame of mind when you're at a location, when being a researcher opposed to being like an investigator or something?
Yes. Well, I've come to the firm conclusion that if people go to a place expecting something to happen, they are much more likely to experience something. And that could be that, they're obviously jumping to any conclusion, or they're opening themselves up. They're going in with the right mindset where things do happen to them and they're open to the experience. So whatever reason it is, people that tend to think something might happen, it seems to be that they tend to get better results.
It's interesting too, because you do have to be careful in those situations because, I hear so many people who are open to it and they tell me what happened, and I don't think I'm a skeptic at heart, but even I am just kind of like wondering, there is that fine line between really wanting something to happen and you take in anything that happens, or that you are able to discern between that line, and it's a tough one. I think as an investigator, I think it is kind of tough to be able to know to kind of know where that line is, I guess.
That's the hardest thing in this whole field. I always say that when you're dealing with the weird, what is too weird?
Yeah.
Where do you draw that line? I had a guy tell me he had interdimensional Bigfoot creatures at his property, and I thought, great, I'll come check it out. And he said, oh, they're having barbecues. They have a swimming pool. They're doing everything we do. And I still was interested in going, but he kind of backed away from it. But again, where do you draw are vampires too weird? Chupacabra, possession? If you draw the line, sometimes you might miss out on some good stuff, but you're absolutely right. The hardest thing is determining, fact from fiction with some witnesses, reading a witness. And most people I take for face value until they give me a reason not to.
Yeah.
Because I love the story and they're diehard believing that it happened. Whether or not it did, I don't know. But to them, it was 100%.
I really like your take on that of, you want to not have to put the filters on too much because you might miss something. There might be something there that might have been hidden by the fact that they're barbecuing, but there actually might be something a little bit more there. As we're running out of time here, can you tell me about any events that are coming up real soon that you'd like people to know about?
Oh, man. Go to Van Meter, Iowa in September. That's not coming up. I've got tons of events. Go to my website, but the big ones are the big conferences I do. But again, just go to any legend that you hear about that is really weird, and that's probably where you find me. But I've got hundreds of lectures and conferences coming up, so just go to my website and drop me a line of a new legend.
And just know that next one for Chad is February 10th, Winter Legends and Lore in Trempealeau. Is that how you say that, Wisconsin?
Yes. Right next to Winona, Minnesota.
Right next to Winona. And then the very next day, Wisconsin's Most Haunted, 11 a.m. at Verona, Wisconsin. As Chad says, if you go to chadlewisresearch.com, there is and under the events, there's a lot of things going on. And I do recommend you going to check it out. Chad, we're out of time, unfortunately, but I'd love to have you back. I hope you'd consider coming back.
Thanks, and keep an eye out.
I always do. Chad Lewis, once again, go to his site, chadlewisresearch.com. We'll be back tomorrow with Marie Cisneros. Everyone, have a great night.